Well, for the unbeliever, the person who's not a Christian, what I tend to do, with people like this is say, okay, here's what I need from you for you to win the argument, for me to join your side.
Atheism isn't a side I'm asking you to join. Atheism is not an allegiance. That's religion. Religion expects things of you, demands loyalty. Atheism has none of that. And the fact that a Christian sees atheism as another religion just like his, only with a different flavor, is projection, to say the least. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Today we've got a bit of a doozy. A Christian actually telling us what would persuade him from his faith. And while that's quite unusual, a theist actually saying his beliefs may be malleable, his standards are still quite illogical. I almost said unreasonable, but that's really only half the problem.
I need you to show me how it's, this is all big picture thinking, how it's philosophically and intellectually coherent to argue that reality is best understood without a God than with one.
I'm hearing this one a lot more than I ever did, saying that a God is the best explanation. Not that they have facts on their side, not that they have evidence of their God, just that they can't wrap their minds around it being any other way. In other words, a great big argument from incredulity fallacy. It is a very weak and unpersuasive argument to take an unproved position simply because another explanation doesn't tickle your fancy. If you cannot show why your position is true, not more satisfying, actually based on evidence, then you should not hold it, and certainly not with any degree of confidence. And I'm sure there is some theist already furiously typing that this is hypocritical of me because I'm an atheist without proving that atheism is true. However, I started out with no God belief from conception, and the people who've told me that there is a God were not persuasive because they didn't have the facts on their side. And so I continue to have no God belief, thus remaining the atheist I started out. In other words, I'm an atheist not because I say there is no God, but because you haven't convinced me to buy what you're selling. To put it more simply, the theist and I started from non-belief, and one of us was told and persuaded that there is a God, and the other wasn't.
So I want you to explain that. I want you to explain why people, and I know so many of these, but why people who have advanced degrees in the hard sciences and in philosophy, why they don't find your criticisms at all persuasive.
If I may engage in a wee bit of sci-fi geekery, who, me? A sci-fi nerd? Surely you jest. Humans are neither Vulcans nor robots. They're emotional and often engage in compartmentalized thinking, will often cling to cherished beliefs when it would turn their world upside down to abandon them. Humans are often quite stupid when life makes them uncomfortable.
In other words, how does that work? And what you usually get is, well, they're all like lying. They really have doubts, or they're just not as smart, or they're filtering stuff out. No, excuse me, but they went to the same schools, they publish in the same journals, they're members in the same academic societies, they're department heads and professors at the major PhD granting institutions in the world.
So basically a watered-down argument from authority fallacy. Surely we should find someone persuasive if they have advanced degrees, right? Not so much. Education doesn't necessarily grant someone legitimacy, nor does it guarantee a person will be logical or reasonable, and certainly not in all subjects. How many of his people with advanced degrees didn't get them in the sciences? How many have a master's in advertising or a PhD in English literature, I wonder? I don't care how educated they are. If they cannot produce a coherent, evidence-based, falsifiable case for the existence of a deity, their level of education is not relevant.
And they just don't find this persuasive. And for you to say that, where's the empirical research that supports that they're deceived or lying? I'd like to see that.
Personally, I just think that they have no leg to stand on when it comes to God belief. I really don't care about them at all. Who they are is not a factor here. I expect them to make a case for God's existence, and I'll quite cheerfully read it in text with their name and background completely concealed in order to stay objective and unbiased. Give me facts and logic and reasons to accept their premise, no matter who they are.
Now, again, that's challenging, but I try to give people homework, essentially. I do this at UFO conferences. I do this, where when I'm lecturing on Zeitgeist or something like that. I mean, I do it everywhere. Here's what I need from you for me to be persuaded to join you.
What do you think atheism is? Join me, and together we will rule the galaxy as heathen and heretic. It's not something you join the way religion is. It's not an allegiance. It's a state of not being a theist. I have no God belief. That's it. Picture everything religious people do when it comes to religion. I don't do those things. That's all. And if religious people could share and play nicely with the other kids, that's as far as my atheism would ever go. I only make these videos in the name of activism against religious bigotry and misbehavior. I'd actually love to stop making them because it's become unnecessary. That'd be lovely. I would cheerfully give up my career as an atheist YouTuber if that was the benefit.
So I don't want to dismiss their criticisms and concerns, but at the end of the day, I need answers. I need coherent answers to questions like these.
And this is a point I make a lot, and one to which I've never had a theist respond with anything other than evasion. This burning need for answers. I have that need too, but unlike theists, I'm not willing to settle for a bad answer in order to stop feeling uncomfortable with having no fact-based conclusion. In my experience, a theist would rather engage in a God of the gaps fallacy than say those 3 difficult words. I don't know.
Just show me. That's not an unreasonable request. I want data. I don't want your anger. Your anger doesn't solve my problem. My problem is I want answers to these questions.
That's true. Wanting data is not an unreasonable request. Yet theists never provide when they're asked for data proving their God is real. Where is the data that led you to become a theist? Where is the evidence that lets you conclude that there is a God? If experience tells me anything, it's that you don't have any, and that any evidence you might present will only show that a God is superfluous to whatever subject we're discussing. Yet you maintain your belief even in the face of this criticism, which tells me that your belief is more emotional than you'd like to admit. Which is ironic, given that he just accused atheists of being angry.
I understand if you're angry. Chances are, I've told people who are atheists or whatever, if I had the caricature of God in my head that you have in yours, I'd already be on
upset.
Yeah, I'd already be on your side. But you've really misunderstood, this or that point of theology. You really do have a caricature living in your head.
Now, whose fault is that? I can only go by what you and your holy books say, how you describe your God in the sales pitch meant to persuade me to buy what you're selling. Maybe you need to adjust your patter if the message isn't being received as you'd hope. And given just how many religions there are, and how many denominations of even just one of them that exist, what do you expect? Sometimes God is loving, sometimes he's vengeful, sometimes he's both, sometimes he's neither. Sometimes this or that bit of the Bible is metaphor, sometimes it's real, and it depends on who you ask. Sometimes getting into heaven is about being good, sometimes it's about repenting and giving God your allegiance, sometimes it's both. There is no consistency. Each Christian denomination seems to have picked and chosen their preferred items from the buffet that is Christianity, and they all preach it as if it's the truth. So don't get your panties in a soaking wad when who and what we think your God is doesn't quite match your own beliefs. It's not our fault.
You've had personal pain and you're not correctly parsing why there's evil in the world. And you may have gotten an answer from a Christian that really hurts you and damages you. And you have every right to do that because it's not a good answer. So I agree with you.
Sheer projection. They love to accuse atheists of this anger and pain, because there's no possible way that their attempts to persuade us didn't land on logical and evidentiary grounds. We're just in denial. And yet it's clear that their own belief is emotional rather than based on data. When you listen to Christians talking among themselves rather than to non-believers, that becomes quite clear.
But you need to take a deep breath and say, well, maybe there's a different way to parse all this. And I'm telling you there is, but so if you want to have a conversation, I'd love to have that conversation with you.
The video ends here rather abruptly. Still, he basically just said, who you gonna believe, me or your lying eyes? He's saying that the evidence is all there, we just haven't looked at it using his bias. I do my best to be objective, to see things without my own filter, but I'm not so open-minded that I'm willing to accept just any interpretation of the data. I'm still a skeptic. This guy pretends at being a skeptic, claims objectivity, while out of the other side of his mouth insists we just haven't interpreted the data his way. And that just doesn't do the logical heavy lifting we need to find out what is actually so. Before I go, I've got 2 thank yous. First, to Moldred for the Orville Season 2. Love the Orville, and it's great that it's finally on disc, even though it is still out there streaming. At least I can rip it to a hard drive so I can have it with me when I travel. Second, to Faye Ellen Schwarzentraub for sending me this light-up gaming keyboard. I'm actually getting a second machine soon. Actually, no, it'll be my 4th machine, but not the point. To help me out with gaming and having a render farm for my animations. So that's pretty awesome. This is a peripheral I needed, so thank you for that as well. So until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. I have that need too, but unlike Theists, I'm not willing to settle for a bad answer in order to stop feeling uncomfortable. More than halfway through, and there's my first blooper. But unlike Theists, I'm not willing to settle for a bad answer in order to stop feeling uncomfortable. I'm gonna have to change that. And given just how many religions there are, and how many denominations of even just one... thought...
You know, Dewey, we wouldn't have to do this if I had more Patreon patrons. Just saying.
Droids don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when their videos aren't rated. Bionic dances are known to do that.